Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to talk about the newest character in Lost Sword, Eva. I'll cover how to build her best cards, pet, and of course whether she worth summoning for or not. So without further ado, let's get started. Eva is a back row shock wizard, and yes, after almost a year since launch, we finally got our 4th shock unit. Her kit can look overwhelming with all of the techs, but I'll break it down for you. At her core, Eva is a powerful shock DPS whose damage relies heavily on her stimulation stacks. She builds these stacks by hitting enemies, which means her damage gets stronger the longer the fight goes. That alone makes her excellent for boss raids and multi-wave content. She can ramp up, max her stacks, and even get multiple ultimates per fight. This scaling allows her to compete with some of the strongest characters in the game in compensating for her lower early fight damage. Her kit may sound complicated at first, but I'll do my best to explain it simply. The core of her power is her passive called Stimulation. At level 3, it gives her a base bonus of 56% attack and 6% crit rate. On top of that, every time she hits an enemy, she gains a stack of Stimulation. And those stacks unlock stronger buffs the more you build them up. From the very first stack, she starts gaining attack speed 1% per stack, which can go all the way up to 25% at max. Once she reaches 30 stacks, she picks up an extra 4% crit rate, and at 60 stacks, she gets another big boost of 20% attack. So as the fight goes on, she keeps scaling higher and higher. Her second passive is also connected to these stacks. When she reaches 20 stacks, her basic attack begins reducing the cooldown of her active skill by 3 seconds for every 3 seconds. This heavily increases her and the team DPS by making her spam her active skill every 5 seconds. This will make sense after checking this part. At 40 stacks, whenever she uses her active skill or her ultimate, she inflicts shock to all enemies. And for the next 3 seconds, those enemies take 5% more damage based on the attacker's attack, which is really boosts her own DPS but also help the whole team because this adds an extra hits to enemies. And everyone in the team can take advantage of it, and you can see these additional hits with the yellow color. And finally, at 80 stacks, she unlocks her strongest mechanic. Her ultimate cooldown instantly resets. Though it has 24 seconds internal cooldown, she can still double ult back to back in the same phase, or ult once in the middle of a wave and then go to the boss fight with her ultimate ready and then get the third ult after it. Now let's talk about her other skills. Her ultimate is really strong. At level 3, it deals 970% of her attack as damage to all enemies with a 34 seconds cooldown. But the big thing, if you have at least 50 stacks when you cast it, the damage is boosted by 19%, which is massive. Ideally, you want to use her ultimate when she's around 60 stacks or more, because of that way she's not only getting the bonus damage from the skill itself, but also gets an extra attack and crit buffs from her passives. And if the enemies are already shocked, she deals even more damage on top of that. Her active skill has a solid AoE too, dealing 320% of her attack as damage to all enemies. Once she reaches 25 stacks, that skill gets even better because its damage is increased by 60% every 8 seconds. And if you remember, her passive and reduce the cooldown of her skill whenever she lands a basic attack, and also apply shock on enemies, which makes it increase her DPS even more the longer the fight drags on. So to summarize Eva's kit, you can really think of her damage in 3 phases. In the early game, from 0 to about 25 stacks, she mostly building up. You're sitting on the baseline attack and crit buffs from her passive, but as soon as the stacks start coming in, she ramps up her attack speed higher and higher. This is not only helps her hit faster, but also speed up how quickly she gets the rest of her buffs. Around this point, she also starts reducing the cooldown for her own active skill as well. Then we hit the mid phase, around 25 to 50 stacks. This is where things get more exciting. Her active skill now gains 60% more damage. At 30 stacks, she gets even more crit rate, and at 40 stacks, both her skill and her ultimate apply shock to enemies, which makes them take extra damage. This turns her into both a strong carry and a team-wide damage amplifier. And by the time she reaches 50 stacks, her ultimate becomes insane, gaining an extra 90% damage multiplier. And finally, there's the late phase. When she's above 60 stacks, usually it takes around 30 seconds to get here against a single target and using a low win spec. Here she picks another 20% attack and eventually a 9% ignore damage reduction at 80 stacks. And most importantly, her ultimate cooldown completely resets and she uses it with the maxed out buffs. Let's move on to her cards. Eva's own resonance card is really strong. It gives her 60% magic attack and 10% crit chance, and its skill is tailor-made for her. Basically, if you have 15 or more beneficial buffs active, she gains a 20% additional damage for the entire fight. This makes a huge difference for her DPS. Now, while her card is her best in slot, you actually have some really good alternatives if you want to skip it. Gia's and Mary's cards are both very solid competitors. At T0, using them instead of her card means you'll be losing around 7 to 8% DPR. But that gap gets much smaller as you invest in her. By the time you reach G5, the difference drops about to 5% when you start adding skill levels to the mix. There's also some team-oriented options like Vivian's card, which buffs your whole squad's damage while keeping Eva's output almost the same as the previous ones. Lua's card is another solid choice, Merlin's too, and if you're chasing faster stacking, attack speed cards like Isabel's and Enya's can work too. Now, I do want to mention something I ran into during testings. When I tried these attack speed cards with Luan's Pet, I noticed some strange interactions. So if you want to use Eva's first ultimate at around 78 to 79 stacks, then immediately try to use her reset ultimate at 80 stacks, which can happen really quick. Sometimes the games cancel out your second ult if you get hit or an enemy has an attack animation on you, like an AoE hit if it's on a boss for example, and that can be a huge DPS loss for her. And I actually had to redo my tests for hours just to time the iframes correctly, and since she stack up very quickly, you'll find yourself with 80 stimulation stacks and you have no second ult. And I even asked the support about this but never got a response, so just keep that in mind if you're planning to run the faster stacking card setups. This might ruin your experience, especially in raids. Now let's talk about her pet, which is a bit of a weird one but actually really strong. At T5 it gives a huge 60% crit damage boost, which is massive. The downside, it also applies a debuff on your team, reducing your crit resistance. At T0 it's a minus 15%, but at T5 it goes down to only minus 5%. That basically means your team can take some harder hits when it's equipped. Personally, I don't think it's a big of a deal because most teams are sitting on just 30 to 50% crit resistance anyway, and if you're not 100%, it's a 50-50 anyways, right? On top of that, the pet also gives a 15% attack and 6% crit chance. And if you run it as a main pet, it also inflicts shocks on enemies, which makes them take an extra 5% damage whenever they get hit. It also gives your whole team an additional 10% damage for 20 seconds. So as you see, it works more like a supportive pet rather than a main one. I wouldn't say this pet is a must-have, but if you're chasing higher scores and boss raids, it's definitely worth it. Personally, I went for G4 on my F2P account since I'm still lacking crit damage bits, and I mainly need it as a secondary option for my second teams in Star Reincarnation. Now it's suck builds. Building Eva is actually really straightforward. For her weapon, the best option by far is Thunderclap Axe. It gives her a 20% crit chance, ignore damage reduction, and added target, which helps her stack up her stimulation stacks really quickly in story mode. If you don't have it, you can run alternatives like Tempest Cane for a more magic attack, the Goddess Staff, or even Infinity Staff. For runes, the obvious pick is Thunderheart for ignore damage reduction and the 60% crit damage once it's refined, and try to get as much crit damage from your substat as possible. If you don't have it yet, you can still use the blue rune from Hard Story or Goddess Rune. Also, the red ones are decent until you upgrade. When it comes to treasures, the best one are Tempest, Goddess Ring, since they both give extra crit chance. The crown is also a nice alternative if you don't have them. For the armor, it depends on the fight. If you want maximum damage, the Green Knight armor or the red robe are the best for boosting her DPS. And since she's a back row unit, she's usually safe from getting targeted. The only time you will really need to worry is against certain enemies like the Sashimi Axe guys for example. In that case, you can switch to tankier options like the Tempest armor, Goddess armor, or Gold armor. Finally, for specialties, keep it simple. Stack crit damage and attack percentage, or mix the two depending on what you have available. When it comes to teams, Eva shines as a strong Shock DPS, and since she's a wizard, pairing her with Galahad is a must. She boosts her with a huge 250% magic attack increase, while also providing a great defensive utility for the entire team. Alongside her, you can run Erin. She's a really solid choice thanks to her attack and additional damage boosts, plus her tanky shields. Alternatively, you can run Rhea, who brings insane attack and massive 75% crit damage buff, while also healing the team. From there, you can flex the rest of your line up. If you want to go all in a Shock team, adding Lua or Ran or even both works really well. If you only bring in one of them, slot in Dion to boost the melee attack and help them hit harder. You can also pair Eva with a second DPS. Tia is a great option since she benefits from the exact same buffs Eva needs, letting you use two of the strongest DPSs in the game in one team. Another option is to keep your melee buffer and slot in Lohengrin for more flexible comps. Overall, Eva isn't restrictive at all. She can be placed in in multiple meta teams. The only drawback is that her damage takes time to ramp up, so you need to play around that, so most of the time you really want a secondary DPS in her teams. So should you summon Eva? Honestly yes. We're still lacking Shock characters and she really solid DPS. Even with the ramp up mechanic, she's competing with some of the strongest DPSs we have right now like Dia, Lohengrin and so on. That said, she does have some drawbacks. She's designed for long fights, and to really get value out of her, you really want her to stack her stimulation buffs, and because of that, it's usually better to run her alongside a second DPS to keep your team's damage rolling while she ramps up. This makes her especially good for raid bosses and absolutely a killing machine in Stonehenge. But I'm scared she won't be performing as well in Star Reincarnation, where fights are really short. There she will be more reliant on magic buffs and cooldown reductions to keep up with the other carries. For Dupes, T3 is the sweet spot if you want to save, while T5 basically double her DPS if you're going all in. As for her card, it's good, but it's not a must pull because she's the only one who can use it as for now. So if you're aiming for high Dupes, you can skip it since it's not a universal resonance card, and we already have really good alternative for it, and some even support your team while giving you almost the same value. And right now we also have Merlin's banner, and if you don't already have Merlin's card, that should be your first stop. Dupes for Merlin don't matter much since her damage is low and she's more of a free supplier, so one copy is enough. Now we suck supports for seconds, especially for global players. Erin is one of my favorite supports in the game. The moment you max her, she'll fit into pretty much every team you will play. Personally, I always value supports more than DPS since DPSs can be replaced or power crept in a minute, but strong supports stick around forever. If you already have a solid DPS like Tia, Lohengrin, Lance, Lua, etc. max, you might just want one copy of Eva and invest in Erin instead if you don't have her yet. But if you love Eva more, you don't like Erin, and you don't care about meta, go for it. And for pets, Phoenix is still a highest priority since it's really good main pet. It's been power crept a little bit by Lowen's pet, but it's still a very useful on the second team and also in certain scenarios, or you can even use it as a supportive pet too. But Eva's pet on the other hand is more of a supportive pet. It's not a must-have unless you're pushing for higher raid scores. I really wanted to make a comparison between Ran and Eva's pet, but I'm so tired. As for Merlin's pet, it's only worth it if you especially need freeze, otherwise it's really skippable since we already have way better options, and even if you decide to run it as a supportive pet. Alright, that's it for now. Now I can go sleep. Hope this video helped you out. Sorry it took a little bit longer than expected. Good luck on your summons, but only if you like the video and subscribe. Alright, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.